This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of the content. So Mike, where did we leave off last time?
Well, we had given an introduction. We had given an introduction on the dashboard, the public dashboard, and one of the examples that we showed was the just the complete lack of rescue polls, you know, for the cat population over the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. Jay Torado had said at the Neighborhood Services Committee meeting in December of 2023, he admitted that they had neglected and or ignored rescue and that they were going to re-engage in 2024. And obviously the numbers don't even remotely suggest that. The numbers were horrible. The percentage of rescue out of the shelter in 2024 calendar year, I think it was 10.5%. So only 10.5% of the cat intake went to rescue. So I want it now in our third episode here, we'll call it episode 1C. I want to let you know what the basis was for pivoting away from rescue, because Matt Lesh got up in December of 2023 and he explained why the shelter pivoted away from rescue. So why don't you read what he said at that NSC meeting at year-end 2023. I believe you have his exact quote. We've taken this word for word from the video of the meeting. And I just want everybody to remember one thing. He's talking about basically why they pivoted away from rescue literally in December of 2023. And he's talking about what the Maddie's Fund audit told them, what the audit had found. And that's the key word, found, right? Audits come up with findings. We just had a city audit of the shelter announced on December 3rd in front of full city council. They had 8 findings and they've made 39 recommendations. So Matt Lesh speaks about what Maddie's Fund had found the shelter to be doing regarding live outcomes. And just remember this, the Maddie's Fund audit was released in August of 2022. So here he is now, 16 months later, right? 16 months later, referencing what he believed Maddie's Fund had found. So just remember that. This is not like the Maddie's Fund audit came out and then 4 months later, he's explaining things. He's explaining things 16 months after the audit came out.
Okay. So here is what Matt said. I think the general logic was, from Maddie's group, was you were over-reliant on rescues, not that you shouldn't rely on rescues. And in our pivot to look at so if the population is, to get your animals out is over-reliant on rescues, which is a finite group, and look at your community at large, which is north of 1 million people, to have a bigger capacity. So you should have a bigger adoption number now than you have. And so then we were trying to pivot to having more adoptions so that the bigger population of San Jose area, that's the logic behind it. So we're over-reliant on rescues is the logic that was provided to us from Maddie's. So when we say we're looking for more capacity at the adoption level, that's the over pivot. And so we shouldn't have pivoted as hard as we did. And if the communication came out from any of our staff that we do not want any rescues to participate with us, that's a false notion. If that came out of us, I apologize if that's the case. That's not our intention. They are a critical part of, again, I look at it as bridges. Every animal has a bridge out of our shelter, and sometimes rescues are so much better for the live outcome of the animal than it would be for adoption. They have so many more resources. Sometimes They can provide a culture of care that the critical animal needs, that an adoption is just inappropriate.
Now, there you have it. Matt basically said that Maddie's fund had found them to be out of balance with other live outcomes like adoption, and that they were overly reliant on rescue. Those were what he said Maddie's fund, their audit had found. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Because if you read the audit, which I don't believe any city council member read this audit, because they never pushed back on this false narrative. This is a false narrative. And it's one of many that senior management and top city administrators at the shelter have promoted. And to this day, Angel Rios, a deputy city manager, he sent me an email. I hadn't heard from him in a year, and he sent me an email last November telling me that I had the Maddie's Fund narrative wrong. And he took one sentence out of the entire audit, where they said, you know, if you can drive adoption, you don't have to be so reliant on rescue. Well, that's a fact. That's like 2 + 2 = 4. That's not a finding. That wasn't a finding. You can't find a single sentence in this audit that says you're over-reliant on rescue and you need to pivot away. Maddie's Fund never said that. Moreover, I've spoken to the shelter consultant for Maddie's. I've spoken to Cameron Moore. I've been on the phone with her probably 24 times in the last year. And we were all sitting in the auditorium there at City Hall listening to Matt's statement. And, you know, he does admit that they may have misinterpreted something, right? But here's the thing. We all participated in these stakeholders meetings that Angel Rios hosted all through 2023, from February through September. Maybe there was one more in November. I didn't go to that one because I thought these were a charade.
Yeah.
None of what we suggested ever got implemented. I don't think they were conducted in good faith. The medical director never participated. You know, and so much of what we talk about is medical care, medical evaluation, protocols, and yet she never participated. No one required her to participate, not Jay
Right.
Tirado, not Angel Rios. But here we went to all these stakeholders meetings, and I mean, we had rescue partners there, we had volunteers. Why would you not share this strategic decision of pivoting away from rescue at the stakeholders meetings?
Right.
They never mentioned this. They didn't say a peep about this. We're going to pivot away. So that tells you right there that this was manufactured. And why did they manufacture this? They manufactured it because 2023 was one of the worst years the shelter had ever seen, where 538 cats died in their kennels. Not euthanized. There were 1,003 that were euthanized, but during calendar year 2024, 538 cats died in their kennels in the shelter's care. And just to give you an idea, just a few years ago, you know, 145 would die during the course of an entire year. And here, that number just exploded to 538. So this narrative that we heard from Matt Lesh, literally, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe what I was listening to because I had never heard this before, and I had been at every single stakeholders meeting, basically, right?
And read the Maddie's report, so you knew what they didn't say.
Right.
They definitely did not say that.
It's not in there. And
Right.
and so here's another point that's very interesting. When I heard this in December of 2023, I turned around a couple of weeks later after the holidays, and I got a hold of Cameron Moore at Maddie's Fund. I said, hey, Cameron, this is Mike Wagner. I was a former partner at the shelter. We had a nonprofit. It was founded by one of your colleagues, Dr. Tiva Hoshizaki. And Cameron Moore has actually done shelter consultancies with Dr. Tiva, because Dr. Tiva was an associate adjunct professor at University of Florida, where Maddie's fund is based out of. So they know each other. So we were talking in early January, maybe the second week of January, and I said, you know, they're not on the same page with you guys. What you've had in your audit, they pivoted away from rescue. They say that you told them to pivot away from rescue. And she's like, well, that wasn't the case at all. And I said, are you willing to put that in writing? And she goes, yes, I am. She goes, I'll send you an email and you can circulate it. Feel free to circulate it to any city administrator at San Jose. So she did exactly that. I mean, I literally within a day or two, she emailed me. And so I sent that email directly to Jennifer McGuire, the city manager, never heard back. I sent it again individually to Deb Davis, the chairman, the then chairwoman of the NSC committee, and I copied Angel Rios, the deputy city manager. They completely ignored me, didn't even reply. Then I turned around and I sent it to Matt Lesh, never heard back from him. When I got him on the phone eventually, I said, Matt, they never said this. It's not in the audit to pivot away from rescue. And he said, well, that's what we were told. And I said, well, who told you that? He didn't say. So it's crazy that we go through all these stakeholders meetings. We never heard this once. And and at year end 2023, I mean, those stakeholders meetings started in February 23rd of 2023. And we had a handful of them. And now Matt in December of 23 is telling us, oh, by the way, we were told to pivot away from rescue. So to me, this is completely manufactured. It's a false narrative because it's an excuse for how bad the year was in 2023. And they could have gotten these animals, you know, they were constantly complaining, oh, we're maxed out, we're at capacity, we're maxed out. Well, that was Jay Torado's decision as deputy director. They could have reached out to rescue and gotten these animals out right away. But instead they chose to warehouse them and they died in unprecedented record numbers. So this is an insult to the community, this email, I mean, this quote at the December NSC meeting in 2023. I think this is
quite insulting.
Huge insult to anybody that participated, a volunteer, rescue partner, former partner like myself, went to all of these stakeholders meetings. You know, we stopped at what we were doing. Some people left work to come attend these meetings that were hosted by Angel Rios that went literally nowhere. And then here's the icing on the cake. According to Cameron Moore at Maddie's Fund, Angel Rios and Matt Lesh have never, ever reached out to her.
Oh, wow.
They've never called her, according to Cameron.
Wow.
So, I mean, if you're Angel Rios and you've made a pledge in front of the mayor and his office on February 24th of 2023, a meeting that many of us were at, that Mackenzie Mossing, his chief of policy, arranged for us. If you pledge to re-engineer the shelter, why would you not reach out to the premier shelter management organization in the country?
And ask for some advice or some tips or something?
It just goes to show that this whole Maddie's Fund audit, this was like a box that SJACS management wanted to check and then be done with. And I know from, and this again is from Cameron Moore, that a month or two after they performed the audit in July of 2022, she followed up with Jay and said, hey, is there anything we can do for you? I can help you guys process intake. We can fly up a team from San Diego Humane. We can help you show how to administer vaccines at intake and process and bookkeep and we have a team that can help you do that. And Jay said, no, we're good.
Wow.
And that was that. That's the last time that Cameron Moore has ever spoken with Jay Tirado, and she's never spoken with Matt Lesh or Angel Rios. And here I am, I'm not getting paid, right? I mean, I went out of my way to try and get everybody back on the same page, and I just got ignored. I got ignored from Deb Davis, Angel Rios.
Yeah.
City manager Jennifer McGuire doesn't care. It's interesting that Matt Mann is now talking about accountability, and we're going to hold senior managers and staff accountable for their raises, because they've always had these automatic raises, right?
Now they're going to have a system. Yeah.
And so now he's saying, well, we're running a budget deficit for the next 2 years, so we're going to make sure that people achieve certain goals, the whole bit. Well, interestingly enough, I did a public records request for OKRs. OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results. And these are basically the goals that people like Matt Lesh set for his directors, like Jay Tirado.
Right.
And Kiska Icard and the medical director, Dr. Cather. So I did this public records request towards the end of last year. And lo and behold, I got an email back saying that there are no records responsive to your request for the last 3 quarters of 2024. So no OKRs, no objectives and key results for the last 9 months of 2024. Councilman Peter Ortiz raised this question at the NSC committee meeting. Matt was completely taken off guard. And he said, well, I'm on top of them every day, so they don't need any OKRs. That's roughly what he said. And there always seems to be an excuse, right? There's always seems to be an excuse why people aren't doing their job, adhering to policy, right? There is policy at the shelter. It's just people are too lazy to read about it.
Yeah. I would love to see what their standard operating procedures are, if they've got any. That'd be something I'd be curious about. Like what is it? I mean, what are they supposed to be doing? And, is this how they wanted to run this shelter?
I actually, I came across the return to field protocols, and they were written by Lawrence Gomez in September of 2020. And it's 8 pages. And let me tell you, it's very rigorous. It's very robust and rigorous and detailed. And I'm sorry, folks, I can't imagine that there's anyone at SJACS right now that's actually applying that to cats that are being returned to the community. I don't have any confidence in that. And, the same thing happened when there was the Pan-Luc outbreak in 2023, right?
Yeah.
They had no idea what to do.
Even though they had a protocol.
Right, exactly.
Dr. Teva.
Dr. Teva had written the protocols in collaboration with Dr. Tyson and Dr. Osterman. They were there, they were on the T drive. Lawrence Gomez even reached out to me and said, Mike, would you like me to get a hold of Jay and tell them where they are? Because I was at a stakeholders meeting on June 26th of 2023, and Jay Tirado said, our protocols are 20 years old and we need to write new ones. And so we need to take time out to do this. Now, the reason why this came up at that meeting was because Anna Spear, a kitten volunteer, had been asking Tara Davis, a shelter manager, about what are your protocols? I'm fostering at home for another outfit, Mini Cat Town. And the last thing I want to do is go into the shelter and volunteer and bring Pan-Luc back into my household. And in fact, infect my fosters, which is what wound up happening. I mean, the Panluke was so out of control, it was being cross-contaminated inside the shelter by staff who weren't wearing personal protective equipment. And so it literally crippled the shelter. It crippled the whole ecosystem, the rescue partners, the fosters.
Yeah.
And it's a nasty virus. I mean,
and it stays, if I'm not mistaken, it stays in environments after the cats have been taken out. So they have to clean a certain way, or it can infect the next set of kittens or cats to go into the kennels, as I understand it. Right. So they have to follow the protocol.
It can last on surfaces up to a year.
Oh, geez.
From what I've read. And so, and that begs another question about, if you're a foster manager, are you educating your fosters and letting them know, like, hey, you have to sit out this kitten season because you had Panluke?
Right.
That didn't happen. I know that for a fact. Because that was a question that I asked Matt Lesh. I said, is your foster manager, Tara Davis, informing her fosters that this virus can stay on surfaces for up to a year?
Right.
And that they probably should sit out and recuse themselves, you know, for a kitten season. So we know that didn't happen. But anyway, Anna Spear was asking this question. She had emailed Tara Davis. 3 weeks go by, Tara doesn't reply back, which is kind of standard operating procedure for the shelter. It's really difficult to get any kind of reply from anyone in a timely manner. 3 weeks go by. So now we're having this meeting. So Anna asks her question, and Jay jumps in and says, well, the Panluke protocols are 20 years old, and we need some time to, you know, write them. And here's the thing. Dr. Teva wrote those protocols. They were last updated and uploaded to the T drive of the shelter in February of 2021. I can give you the exact date, February 26th of 2021.
Which is not 20 years ago.
They weren't 20 years old. So here you have the deputy director of one of the larger animal shelters on the West Coast making well over $200,000 a year, and he has no idea, no clue that Dr. Teva last updated these protocols just about not even 2.5 years prior to this stakeholder meeting. And then what's interesting is I did a public records request for the new protocols written by Dr. Cather, and they literally mimic Dr. Teva's, almost page for page.
She copy pasted.
Right, except for maybe a paragraph. I would say 80–90% of it was exactly the same. And you know what the date was on those protocols that it was published? June 27th, one day after our meeting.
Wow. They're like, oh, I guess we better write some Panluke protocols.
You know, I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but
maybe they were already working on it. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope they would, because you know, Dr. Chad Alvis was working at the shelter part-time. He was a large dog specialist, did all this spay neuter on large dogs, and he no longer works there. And he shared with a colleague of ours, another veterinarian, that they had panleukopenia in the surgical suite. In the surgical suite.
Oh no.
So there's a lot of dysfunction at this shelter. There's I think a very, very poor culture. And again, the thing that blows me away is just the lack of accountability. They'll never admit that they've made a mistake. I mean, the closest you'll hear is when Jay Tirado admitted that they had neglected rescue partners. That's as close as you'll hear an admission of, you know, we messed up.
Right.
But they have so many opportunities, so many resources in this community, you know, people that want to help them. I mean, Cameron Moore at Maddie's Fund is just a delight to talk to. She's so positive.
We should interview her.
Let's do it.
We
Let's
should.
do it. She is a tremendous, valuable resource. I mean, just a wealth of information. And, you know, Jay, Matt Lesh, Angel Rios have never reached out to her. And it's sad. And so I don't know how you improve this shelter with the same team, the same people leading the way. And apparently it's acceptable to Jennifer McGuire, the city manager, because she hasn't replaced anyone.
Well, I mean, we think with this new merit-based thing that Mayor Mahan is talking about, I mean, is it actually going to be used? Because if you go and look at what Matt Lesh has accomplished with the animal shelter here the last couple of years, pretty bad rating. I mean, are we going to actually look at what he's accomplished? Because
he's on year number 3. And
yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, regarding Matt Mahan's wanting to hold people accountable for their raises, I believe this has to go to the voters in November. Right?
Yeah.
So the voters have to vote for this.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's so it's going to take a while for that. But it's preposterous that you have people making nearly $400,000 a year that are playing the victim, right? They're playing the victim, and they're saying that there are people out there trying to smear the shelter who have ulterior motives. I can't even begin to imagine what those motives would be, right?
We want the shelter to succeed and save animals. Why would we make it look even worse than it is? It's already bad. I mean, we're speaking the truth.
I mean, look, as soon as they announced this audit, I sent the Maddie's Fund audit to everybody, city council members, and I said, well, wait a minute, we already have an audit. It was already done. They just didn't do it. They just didn't implement.
No follow through.
Yeah, they just largely ignored it. We see a dog named Rufus, a pit bull, who had been at the shelter for about 10 months. And he goes in for a simple neuter surgery. Shouldn't take more than what, 8 or 9 minutes. And the dog dies. They find the dog deceased. A cleaning person, I believe, right? And the dog was nowhere near the medical department. He wasn't being monitored. He wasn't being watched. It doesn't say this at all in the medical records. Doesn't say this in the necropsy that Dr. Marissa McKinley performed, in which she came to the conclusion that the cause of death was undetermined. Let me just read you the second page, the findings of her examination. And I'll just keep it really short. Severe sanguineous congestion of pulmonary parenchyma in all lung lobes, likely postmortem changes, plus or minus sequela of CPR actions. So they found some congestion in the lungs, probably from, you know, trying to get him back, you know, through CPR. Moderate gas and fluid within gastrointestinal tract. Cause of death, undetermined. Just remember that. Cause of death, undetermined. But this dog, make no mistake, was placed back in his original kennel that he had been in for 10 months. And that kennel is hundreds and hundreds of feet away from the medical department. So there was no way that there were any eyes on this dog post-op, while he was trying to recuperate and recover from being under anesthesia. Now we fast forward. This was December 3rd. On December 12th, there was an NSC committee meeting where Matt Lesh presented the annual report for the animal shelter. And at one point, council member Peter Ortiz wanted to bring up what happened to Rufus. And he asked, quite simply, are you going to request an alternative forensic investigation just to make sure everything is on the up and up, quote unquote, on the up and up. And this was Matt Lesch's response. And Matt Lesch basically said that in this particular case, we don't intend to. And he went on to say that we think we understand why Rufus died. And then he passed on the commentary to Dr. Cather, the medical director. And she started talking about kennel location and procedure and how, quote unquote, there was no fault, no neglect. It was a freak accident. Rufus's death, she said, was a freak accident. Matt Lesch also categorized the death as an accident, a tragic accident. And yet, what's so interesting to everybody who was there in the auditorium that day is that they never told us why Rufus died. Matt Lesch said, we believe we understand why Rufus died, and yet they proceeded not to tell us why he died. And instead, Dr. Cather did this long song and dance and spin about where kennels are located and overcapacity issues and et cetera, et cetera. And not a single city council member pushed back and said, could you please tell us why he died? You said you understand why he died, but yet not a single city council member even asked that. And then Dr. Cather, I guess she wanted to show that she was in charge. And she said, I immediately went to work writing protocols to make sure that this will never happen again.
Where were those protocols in all the months before that she was the medical director? This should have been established, right?
Thank you. Thank you. And not a single city council member picked up on that. Or if they did, they didn't say a peep. Because we all sat there and said, you've been medical director for over 2 years, since September of 2022. And you're telling us that you didn't have any post-op protocols? I'm pretty sure they're there on the hard drive because Dr. Osterman and Dr. Tyson were highly professional.
Yeah.
So, and yet city council just sat there. They didn't say a word. And again, more spin, lots of spin, and no accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Zero accountability. And it's sad. It's just tragic because for some reason, the city manager of San Jose, California just doesn't want to hold anybody accountable for not doing their job properly and not having the proper skill set. There's no medical professional that I know, veterinarian or doctor, physician for humans,
Mm-hmm.
that believes that it's acceptable to leave a patient unmonitored, still unconscious, post-surgery.
No airway protection, leave him by himself.
Yeah, his neck probably, he probably died of positional asphyxia. If I had
very likely, right?
And yet I even made a request. I made an official request to Deputy City Manager Angel Rios. And I also submitted this to all city council members. And it was also submitted in the public comments. And I requested a third-party necropsy. And I even included the medical records for Rufus because I had requested them. Mm-hmm. And I never heard back from Mr. Rios, which is quite typical.
On brand. I think we should end it here. We've had a lot to think about, and we'll pick this up next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Look forward to having some guests on here in the future that because you're probably tired of me, and We look forward to inviting some volunteers and former volunteers and rescue partners, to share with you their experiences with the San Jose Animal Care Center.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye. Sustainer Shelters Blogcast is hosted by Rebecca Davis Matthews and Michael Wagner and edited by Rebecca Davis Matthews. You can find the vlog on YouTube and the podcast on your favorite podcatcher, including Amazon, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All rights reserved, copyright 2025 by Sustainer Shelters.